ran! I finally ran!
The first light of dawn is breaking over a quiet street in a town that could be anywhere in the United Kingdom. The houses are ordinary, the kind with pebble-dash walls and net curtains and gardens that people tend to on Sunday mornings. Behind one of those doors, behind one of those net curtains, a woman is waking up. Her name is Eleanor Roach. She is 58 years old. And she has not made a decision for herself in 11 years. Not a single one. Not what to wear. Not what to eat. Not when to sleep. Not when to wake. Her life has been reduced to a series of permissions granted or denied by a man who believes he owns her. And today, something is going to break. But before we get to that, before we watch Eleanor Roach do something that will change everything, I want you to settle in. This is Fireside Tales, and we bring you stories that stay with you. If you find yourself moved by what you are about to hear, consider subscribing, because there are more stories like this one. Stories that need to be told, stories that need to be heard. Now, let us go back to Eleanor. Look at her now, standing at the sink in this kitchen that is hers only in the way a cage belongs to the bird inside it. See how she moves, small movements, economical, as if taking up too much space might be a crime. She washes a single mug, not because there is only one mug to wash, but because she has learned that using 2 mugs in one day is wasteful, and wastefulness is a sin she learned that 11 years ago, when she first became a woman who needed to be managed. The mug is placed on a perfectly positioned mat on a perfectly wiped counter, in a kitchen so immaculate it screams of a woman with nothing to do but clean, and a woman with nothing to do but clean is a woman who has been slowly and deliberately stripped of everything else. Her hands are raw, the skin around her knuckles cracked and red from bleach, from scrubbing, from water so hot it burns. But she does not feel the burn anymore, because feeling things was the first thing she was taught to unlearn. Look at the back door. Look at the heavy-duty bolt at the top, installed after the incident with the postman. The postman, a young man named Dev, had smiled at her, just a normal smile, and asked if she was having a nice day, a normal question, a human question. For that, the bolt was installed. For that, Eleanor Roach lost her mobile phone. For that, she spent 3 nights on the kitchen floor, because she had invited a man into her life with her eyes. His words, not hers. She no longer has words for such things. She has not had words for such things for a very long time. Now look at the living room in the evening. See the man in the only comfortable chair, a large worn leather recliner that has molded itself to his body over years of sitting while she stood. His name is Terry Roach, he is 62 years old, and he is holding a can of beer, watching football with the volume so loud the walls seem to vibrate with the roar of the crowd. He does not look at the doorway where Eleanor stands. He never looks at her first, because looking first would imply she is worth looking for. She holds a small plate with a sandwich cut into perfect triangles, the crusts removed the way he likes it. She does not look at his face. She looks at his hands, because his hands are what she has learned to fear most. And she speaks, her voice a whisper so quiet it seems to be asking permission just to exist. Your tea, Terry. He does not look at her. He takes the plate, examines the sandwich with the concentration of a man inspecting evidence of a crime. He speaks without looking up, his voice flat and calm. The calm of a man who knows he holds every card. What's this? Cheese, your favorite, with a bit of pickle. And now his face twists, something ugly and slow moving across his features like oil spreading on water. He drops the plate onto the coffee table, not slamming it, just letting it go, so the sandwich falls apart, the cheese sliding from the bread, the triangles now just scattered pieces of failure. He looks at her now, finally he looks at her, and his voice does not rise. It never needs to rise, because he has trained her to hear thunder in a whisper. I told you this morning. I told you specifically. I said, Eleanor, my stomach's been off. I want plain ham, nothing else. Do you listen, or do you just stand there, waiting for the sound of your own voice to stop so you can do whatever you want? Here is the artistry of it. The cruelty is not in the shout, the cruelty is in the revision. He told her ham. He did not tell her ham. He told her nothing that morning. He grunted when she asked what he wanted for tea. He grunted, and she had to interpret the grunt, the way she has learned to interpret every silence, every shift of his weight, every exhale. But in this moment, his memory becomes fact. her reality becomes a lie. She is not a wife who made a small forgettable mistake. She is a woman who deliberately, maliciously, defied him. She is his adversary, and he has trained her to believe it, with the same precision he once used to train the dogs he kept in the garden before the neighbors complained about the barking. She says she is sorry. She says she will make it again, and he shakes his head no with that slow, deliberate patience of a man who has all the time in the world to break a woman down. He tells her she will sit and she will watch him, and she will remember this feeling, the feeling of failing, because that is all she does, isn't it? She fails. She cannot even make a proper sandwich for a man who gives her everything. He gestures to the floor beside his chair, the hard wooden floor where his feet rest, where she has spent hundreds of nights, hundreds of hours, learning the grain of the wood, the cold that seeps through her clothes, the way her knees ache after the first hour and then go numb. Eleanor Roach walks to the floor beside his chair. She lowers herself to her knees, her back straight, her hands in her lap, the position she has learned to hold because slouching is disrespect, and disrespect is punished. The football roars on, the crowd cheers for goals she does not see. She does not see anything except the edge of his slipper, the worn leather, the slight crack in the sole. She has memorized the slipper. She knows it better than she knows her own face, because she has not looked at her own face in a mirror for years, not really looked, not since the morning she found the gray in her hair and he told her she was letting herself go deliberately to spite him. An hour passes, an hour of her kneeling, an hour of him sitting, an hour of silence broken only by the commentary, the adverts, the occasional crunch of him biting into a biscuit. She does not move. She does not shift her weight. She does not allow herself to breathe too loudly, because breathing loudly is attention-seeking, and attention-seeking is a provocation, and provocation has consequences. She has learned the consequences. She has the scars on her ribs, the ache in her jaw, the memory of the shed to remind her what the consequences look like. Now it is night, and the bedroom is dark. Eleanor lies on the very edge of the bed, as far from Terry as she can be without falling onto the floor. He is a large, still shape beside her, the sheets rising and falling with his breath. He is not asleep. She knows he is not asleep because she has learned to read the rhythm of his breathing, the way a sailor learns to read the sea before a storm. His breath is too controlled, too steady. He is awake and he is thinking, and when he is thinking, she is afraid. She lies on her back, staring at the ceiling where the streetlight outside casts a pale orange glow through the thin curtains. She does not move. She does not turn over. She does not pull the blanket higher, because any movement might be interpreted as restlessness, and restlessness might be interpreted as dissatisfaction, and dissatisfaction might be interpreted as ingratitude. And she knows what happens when he decides she is ungrateful. A single tear escapes from the corner of her eye. It slides down her temple into her ear, a tiny saltwater river that no one will ever know existed. She does not wipe it away because wiping it away would be a movement, and movements are dangerous. In the silence, he is planning. She knows this in her bones, the way animals know a storm is coming before the sky darkens. And in the silence, she is dissolving. She thinks of her friend Maureen. Maureen, who she used to see at the community center for the over 50s. They did crafts. Eleanor was good at the knitting. She made little hats for the premature baby unit. Tiny things no bigger than her palm, in soft yellow and pale blue. Maureen would drive her. It was the one place she was allowed to go without him because he said the community center was for old women with nothing better to do, and she was becoming an old woman with nothing better to do, so she could go. But only with Maureen, only on Tuesdays, only for 2 hours. Until Maureen called her love. Maureen touched her arm at the end of a Tuesday afternoon. A friendly touch, a normal touch, a touch between women who had spent months sitting together knitting tiny hats for babies who had arrived too early. Terry was waiting in the car that day. He was always waiting in the car on Tuesdays because Tuesdays were the only day she was allowed to leave, and he wanted to make sure she returned. He saw Maureen touch her arm, and he smiled at Maureen, the smile he gives people he is about to destroy. And he said nothing, not a single word, not then. He waited until they got home, until the front door was closed, until the bolt was slid into place. Then he took her keys, he took her phone, he took her purse, and he explained, with that quiet, reasonable voice he uses when he is about to dismantle a life, that Maureen was a bad influence, a woman who encouraged her to be independent. And independence, he explained, was just another word for selfishness, for abandonment. You would not abandon me, would you, Eleanor? She has not seen Maureen in 4 years. She does not know if Maureen still goes to the community center. She does not know if Maureen still knits tiny hats for premature babies. She does not know if Maureen ever wondered what happened to the quiet woman with the raw hands who stopped coming on Tuesdays. She hopes Maureen forgot her. She hopes Maureen does not carry the weight of wondering, because wondering is a weight, and Eleanor is already carrying enough weight for a dozen women. Now it is day, a weekday, a Tuesday perhaps, and there is a knock at the front door, a sharp official rap, the sound of someone who expects to be answered. Eleanor freezes in the hallway, her hand halfway to the banister. She has been walking upstairs to change the sheets because changing the sheets is a Tuesday task, and Tuesday tasks must be done on Tuesdays, or the week falls apart. And a week that falls apart is her fault. Everything is her fault. She has learned that lesson so thoroughly, it is now a bone-deep truth, like the truth of gravity or the truth of winter. She looks at the front door, then towards the stairs. Terry is out. He is always out on Tuesdays because Tuesdays are the day he visits his brother in Doncaster, a day she has learned to measure in hours of silence, hours of being alone in the house, hours of existing without being watched. This knock is an intrusion, a crack in the careful architecture of her week. Her hand trembles as she reaches for the handle. She opens the door a crack, a sliver of light and color, and the outside world that smells of rain and car exhaust and something green growing somewhere. A woman stands on the doorstep, a woman with a lanyard around her neck and an ID badge clipped to her coat. She looks kind. Her face is open, her eyes are concerned, the kind of eyes that have seen things and have not yet learned to look away. She speaks, her voice warm and professional. Mrs. Roach, Eleanor? I'm from Adult Social Care. We're doing a wellness check, just a routine thing. Your GP surgery said you'd missed a couple of appointments. May I come in? Here is the moment, the fulcrum. The universe, in its careless way, has presented Eleanor Roach with a key, a door, a chance. A woman with a lanyard and a kind face, who is asking if she can come in. And all Eleanor has to do is say yes. All she has to do is open the door a little wider. All she has to do is let the light in, and everything could change. Her heart is a trapped bird in her ribs. She can feel it beating against her chest like something trying to escape a cage. She has not felt her heart beat like this in years. She had forgotten it could beat like this. Her mouth is dry, her tongue sticks to the roof of her mouth. Her eyes dart behind the social worker, scanning the street, because scanning the street is a reflex she has learned to do before she opens the door, before she speaks, before she breathes too loudly. And she sees it. The car. The gray Ford. The car that is supposed to be in Doncaster until 6 o'clock. The car that is turning the corner at the end of the street. The car that is pulling into the driveway, even as she stands there with the door open a crack, the world leaking in, and him arriving to close it. She speaks, her voice cracking, a sound that comes from somewhere deep in her throat, a sound she did not know she could still make. No, I'm fine. Everything's fine. The social worker frowns. She sees something in Eleanor's face, something that troubles her. She puts her hand on the door, not pushing, just touching the wood as if to steady it. Are you sure? You seem a little. Maybe I could just have a quick chat? The car door slams. The sound travels through the quiet street like a gunshot. Eleanor's face drains of color. She has seen this happen in films, the blood leaving the face, the sudden pallor of terror. But she has never seen it on herself. She does not have mirrors. She does not need mirrors to know she looks the way she feels, hollowed out and desperate and so afraid it is a physical thing. A weight pressing on her chest, a hand around her throat. She speaks, her voice a low, urgent hiss that surprises her with its force. You have to go now. Please, just go. The social worker puts her hand on the doorframe, confused now, concerned now, perhaps beginning to understand something that Eleanor cannot say. Eleanor, Is someone in the house with you? Are you safe? Another car door slam, heavier this time the driver's side. The sound of his door closing. The sound of his footsteps on the driveway. The sound of keys being taken from the ignition. The sound of him walking towards the front door, where she stands in her cardigan with her raw hands and her hollow face, and the only person who has asked her if she is safe in 11 years. Eleanor's eyes are wide with a panic so pure it is almost holy. She has prayed before, in the dark, in the shed, in the long hours on the kitchen floor. She has prayed to a God she is not sure exists. And now she prays to this woman with the kind face and the lanyard. She prays with her eyes. She prays with the desperation that has been building in her for 4,015 days. She says, if you care, you will go. Please, for the love of God, go. He can't see you. He can't see you here. She shoves the door. She shoves it with a strength she did not know she still possessed. She forces it closed, the latch catching the wood, the sound of it closing like a final sentence. She leans her back against the door, her chest heaving, her hands shaking. She can hear the social worker on the other side, muffled words she cannot make out, then silence, then footsteps walking away, then the sound of a car door opening and closing, then the sound of an engine starting, then the sound of the car driving away. And she is alone again. She is always alone again. The key turns in the lock from the outside, a slow, deliberate turning, the sound of metal on metal, the sound of her world closing back around her. The door pushes open. She stumbles forward because she was leaning against it, and now there is nothing to lean on. And she is standing in the hallway, facing him. Terry Roach in his jacket, still with the smell of the car on him, the smell of Doncaster, the smell of the outside world that she is not allowed to touch. He looks from her face to the closed door to the empty street beyond the glass panel beside the door. He looks at everything the way a detective looks at a crime scene, searching for the evidence of betrayal. He speaks, his voice quiet, the quiet that is worse than shouting. Who was that? No one. Wrong house. He steps inside. He closes the door behind him, the lock turning again, the bolt sliding into place. He leans in, his face inches from hers, and she can smell the beer on his breath, the faint scent of the sandwich he ate in Doncaster, the sandwich she did not make for him, because she was here alone in the house. She was supposed to be cleaning, and instead she opened the door to a stranger. She invited the world in with her eyes, with her trembling hand, with her terrible, desperate hope. He says, wrong house? Do you think I am stupid, Eleanor? Do you think I do not see? You were just standing there, were not you, at the open door like a whore inviting in the whole street. What did you tell them? What did you say? He grabs her arm. His fingers finding the soft flesh beneath her sleeve, the place where the bone is close to the surface, the place where pressure becomes pain, becomes bruise, becomes the story she will carry under her cardigan for the next 2 weeks, until the yellow fades to green and the green fades to the color of her skin again. Not hard enough to bruise, not yet. Just enough to make her gasp. Just enough to remind her that he can close his hand a little tighter whenever he chooses. He says, you listen to me. If I ever come home and find the front door not locked, if I ever find you talking to anyone without my permission, I will take you to the shed. You remember the shed, Eleanor? You remember what happens in the shed? The cold, the dark, the quiet. You will scream for a week, and no one will hear. Do you understand me? Eleanor nods, a tiny jerky movement, the movement of a woman who has learned that nodding is faster than speaking, and speaking is dangerous, and danger is something she carries in her chest every day like a second heart. She does not look at his face. She looks at his hand on her arm. She looks at the place where his fingers press into her flesh, and she feels nothing. Not the pain, not the fear, not anything. Because feeling things is a luxury she cannot afford. She has not been able to afford it for 11 years. She says, I understand. And her voice is flat and empty. And he releases her arm and walks past her into the living room, to the leather chair, to the television remote, to the evening that will unfold the way every evening unfolds, with him in the chair and her on the floor, and the hours passing like water through a sieve. Now it is dawn, and Eleanor is alone in the kitchen. The house is silent, The way a house is silent when the man who owns it is still asleep upstairs. She sits at the small kitchen table, the table where she eats her meals standing up, because sitting at the table would be taking up space she does not deserve. In her hand, she holds a photograph, the only photograph she has left, a photograph of her daughter Claire at her university graduation. Claire is laughing, her cap askew, the tassel swinging beside her face. She is young and bright and full of a future that Eleanor once believed she would be part of. Eleanor is in the photograph too, younger than she is now, her face full of light and pride, her arm around her daughter, her smile the smile of a woman who believed she had done something right. Claire is in Australia now, has been for 8 years. Eleanor has not spoken to her daughter in 6 years, because Terry made sure of that. Every letter, every birthday card, every Christmas parcel he intercepted. He read them first, then he put them in the bin, or he put them in the shed, or he used them to start the fire in the garden on the nights he burned things. He told Claire her mother was fading, not herself, that visits upset her too much, that the doctor said she needed quiet and rest. And Claire, believing him, because why would she not believe him? He was her stepfather. He was the man who had taken care of her mother for years. He was the reasonable voice on the phone, the steady presence in the letters, the man who said, "I am sorry, love, your mother is not well enough to talk today." And Claire believed him because daughters believe what they are told about their mothers. And he told Eleanor that Claire was too busy with her new life to call, that she had a career now, a husband now, a house by the sea, that she did not have time for a mother who could not even keep her own kitchen clean. He told her these things in his quiet, reasonable voice, and Eleanor believed him, because she had stopped believing in herself long before she stopped believing in anything else. Now she sits at the kitchen table with the photograph in her hand, and she looks at her daughter's face, and she does not see her daughter. She sees the gap, the distance, the years. She sees a stranger, a woman she has never met, who shares her blood and her name and nothing else. And she sees the woman she used to be, the woman in the photograph, the woman with the smile and the light and the tiny hats she knitted for babies who arrived too early. And it feels like looking at an obituary of someone she once knew, someone who died a long time ago, in a country far away. She traces the outline of Claire's face with her fingertip, the curve of her cheek, the line of her jaw, the place where her smile lifts at the corner. She traces it the way a blind woman traces the face of someone she will never see again. And then she takes a breath that is not a breath of hope. Hope is a word she has not allowed herself to think in years. This breath is something else. Something that has been building in her for 11 years. Something that has been growing in the dark like a root seeking water, like a seed waiting for the ground to crack. She puts the photograph on the table, and she takes a napkin from the holder beside the salt and pepper shakers. She takes a pen from the drawer where she keeps the batteries and the string and the little screwdriver that Terry does not know is there, because he does not look in the drawer, he does not look anywhere she is allowed to exist. She writes on the napkin, her hand shaking so badly the letters are barely legible, but she writes them anyway. Claire's name, Claire's address, the address she memorized 8 years ago, when the last letter came before the silence. She repeated it to herself in the dark, in the shed, on the kitchen floor, like a prayer, like a spell, like the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. 23 Ocean View, Brisbane, Australia. She folds the napkin small enough to fit in her palm, small enough to hide in her sleeve, small enough to carry with her wherever she goes. And then she stands. She looks at the back door, the heavy bolt at the top, the bolt that was installed after the postman smiled at her. She looks at the bolt, and she knows she cannot reach it. She looks at the front door, the new digital lock with the code she does not know. She has never been told the code, because knowing the code would mean she could leave, and leaving is not something Eleanor Roach is allowed to do. She looks at the windows, the double-glazed, sealed windows that do not open. They open. They must open. She has seen him open them in the summer, when the house gets too hot even for him. She has watched him lift the handle and push the glass outward. And she has memorized the way his hand moved, the pressure he applied, the small trick of turning the handle past the point of resistance. She looks at the kettle. It is full. She filled it this morning because making tea is the first task of the day, and tasks must be done in order or the day falls apart. She picks up the kettle, her hands trembling, the water sloshing against the sides. She looks at the window, the kitchen window that faces the back garden. The garden with the shed at the end of it. The shed where she has spent hours she cannot count, the hours she will not count, because counting the hours would be giving them power she does not want them to have. She places the kettle on the floor, and she pulls her cardigan sleeve over her fist, the way she has seen people do in films, the way she has imagined doing 1,000 times in the dark of the shed, when she was rehearsing this moment over and over again in her mind. Because somewhere in her, somewhere deep and buried and nearly dead, there was a part of her that always knew she would have to break something to be free. She looks at the window, and she raises her fist, and for a moment, she is frozen there, her arm up, her sleeve-covered fist poised against the glass. The dawn light coming through the window, lighting up the dust motes in the air, lighting up her face, her raw hands, her hollow cheeks, her eyes that have not held light in 11 years. And now there is something there, something small and fierce and terrible, something that has been growing in the dark and is finally ready to be seen. She brings her fist down. The sound of shattering glass is sharp and violent and beautiful. It is the sound of everything breaking and everything beginning. It is the sound of 11 years ending in a single moment. And she stands there, her hand bleeding because the glass has cut through the cardigan, through the skin beneath, through the muscle and tissue, and into something deeper, something that has been bleeding for a very long time without anyone seeing. She reaches through the broken pane, her blood dripping onto the sill, onto the counter, onto the floor, and she finds the latch. She turns it. She pushes the window open. Cold, fresh air floods the kitchen, air that smells of rain and soil and the green things growing in the garden. She has not smelled this air in years. She has smelled the air of this house, the air of the shed, the air of the kitchen where she kneels on the floor. But she has not smelled the air of the outside, the air that moves freely across the land, the air that does not ask permission to exist. She stands at the open window, and she breathes, and the air fills her lungs. And for a moment, she is just a woman standing at a window, breathing. Then she climbs onto the counter, her movements clumsy and desperate, her slippers slipping on the wet surface, her hands gripping the frame, her leg catching on a shard of glass that slices through her trousers, through the skin of her calf. And she does not feel it. She does not feel anything except the need to be on the other side of this window. She pulls herself through. She falls onto the wet patio stones outside, landing hard on her side, her hip hitting the ground, her hand scraping against the rough surface. And for a moment, she lies there on the cold stone, breathing in the rain-soaked air. And she does not move. She does not move because moving would mean she is awake, and being awake means this is real. And if this is real, then she has done what she has dreamed of doing for 11 years. And she does not know what comes next. But then she gets up. She gets up because lying on the stones is what she did in the shed. And she is not in the shed anymore. She is outside. And the world is gray and wet. And the dawn light is spreading across the sky, turning the clouds pink and orange. And she is standing in her slippers with blood running down her hand and her leg. And she is free. She is free. She is free. And she does not look back. She runs down the garden path, past the shed. She does not look at the shed. She will never look at the shed again. She runs through the gate that swings open on rusty hinges. She runs down the alleyway behind the houses. She runs onto the street where the morning is just beginning, where a man is putting out his bins, where a woman is walking her dog, where a car is pulling out of a driveway. And she runs past them all, an old woman in a bloodied cardigan and slippers, running down the gray British street as the first light of dawn touches the rooftops. And people turn to look at her, and she does not stop. She cannot stop because stopping is what she has done for 11 years, and she is done with stopping. She runs until she reaches the high street, where the shops are still closed, where the bus stop is empty, where a taxi is dropping off a man in a suit. She runs to the taxi. She opens the door. She falls into the back seat. And the driver turns around, and his face changes when he sees her. Her bleeding hand, her torn cardigan, her face that is streaked with tears. She did not know she was crying. And he asks her where she needs to go, and she opens her mouth. And for a moment, no sound comes out, because she has not been asked where she wants to go in 11 years. She has not been asked what she wants in 11 years. She has not been asked anything that assumes she has a will of her own. She says, "The police station. Please take me to the police station." And her voice is raw and cracked, and it is the voice of someone who has not used her voice for anything except asking permission in a very long time. And the driver nods, and he drives, and she sits in the back of the taxi, watching the streets pass by, the houses, the gardens, the schools, the shops. And she does not know where she is, because she has not been allowed to see these streets in 11 years, except through the window of a car driven by a man who told her where to look and when to look and what to see. She arrives at the police station, and she walks through the doors. And the woman at the front desk looks up, and her face changes too, the way faces change when they see a woman who has been broken and has somehow put herself back together long enough to walk through a door and ask for help. Eleanor opens her mouth, and she says, "My name is Eleanor Roach, and I need to report a crime." And the woman at the desk comes around to the front, and she takes Eleanor's arm, and she leads her to a small room, and she brings her a cup of tea, and she sits across from her, and she asks her what happened. And Eleanor tells her. She tells her everything. The kitchen floor, the shed, the bolt on the door, the postman who smiled at her, the friend who touched her arm, the letters that never reached her daughter, the photograph in her cardigan pocket, the napkin with the address written in shaky letters. She tells her everything. And as she speaks, the words come faster and faster, like water breaking through a dam, like blood flowing from a wound that has been bandaged for 11 years and finally allowed to bleed. A police constable, a young woman with kind eyes, comes into the room and sits across from Eleanor. And Eleanor is wrapped in a silver thermal blanket because someone has put it around her shoulders, and she did not notice until now. She looks down at her hands, at the cuts, at the blood that has dried on her skin. And she thinks, these are the hands that knitted tiny hats for babies who arrived too early. These are the hands that made sandwiches cut into perfect triangles. These are the hands that broke a window so she could breathe. And she looks at the police constable and she speaks, her voice a whisper now because her voice is tired, because she has used it more in the last hour than she has used it in the last 11 years. She says, "My daughter. I need to find my daughter." And she reaches into her cardigan pocket, and she pulls out the napkin, crumpled and damp with blood, and she pushes it across the table. And the police constable looks at it, and then she looks at Eleanor, and her eyes are wet. And she reaches across, and she takes Eleanor's hand. And Eleanor flinches, because she has not been touched with kindness in so long that kindness feels like a blow. But then her fingers slowly curl around the constable's hand. And she holds on like a drowning woman finding a piece of driftwood in a stormy sea. 6 months later, Eleanor Roach is sitting in a small flat. Not the house. Not the kitchen with the immaculate counters. Not the bedroom where she lay on the edge of the bed waiting for morning. This flat is hers. It is small and the furniture is not new, and the windows look out onto a street where cars pass and children play. And there are plants on the windowsill because she decided she wanted plants, and she went to a garden center and she bought them herself with money from her own account that she opened herself with her own name on the card. And on the arm of the chair there is a half-finished knitted hat in soft yellow wool because she has started knitting again for the premature baby unit at the hospital because she remembered that she was good at something once, and she is good at it still. She is sitting on the small sofa, and on the table in front of her is a laptop, and on the screen is her daughter, Claire. Claire's face is streaked with tears, but she is smiling. A smile so wide it seems to crack her face open. And behind her, through a window, Eleanor can see a garden. An Australian garden with trees she does not recognize, and sunlight that looks different from the sunlight here, brighter somehow, more golden. And Claire is speaking, her voice choked with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I swear to you I did not know. I will be on the next flight. I am coming home." And Eleanor looks at her daughter's face. She looks at the woman her daughter has become, the woman she has not seen in 6 years, the woman she thought she would never see again. And she smiles. A smile that is rusty and unpracticed, but it is there. It lights up her face. It reveals the woman she once was, the woman she is slowly, painstakingly becoming again. And she speaks, her voice steady now, stronger than it was 6 months ago, stronger than it has been in 11 years. No, my love, you stay. I will come to you. I have always wanted to see Australia. They say the light is beautiful there, like nothing else. She reaches a hand towards the screen, as if to touch her daughter's face. And her hand is still raw, the skin still cracked. But there is color in her cheeks now, and light in her eyes. And she is not the woman who knelt on the kitchen floor. She is not the woman who broke a window with her bare hand. She is something new, something that has grown from the wreckage of the old, something that is still fragile, still healing, but something that is alive. Terry Roach was arrested that same morning, the morning Eleanor ran through the streets in her bloodied cardigan and her slippers. The police found him in the kitchen, standing at the broken window, staring out at the street as if the world had just been stolen from him. He was charged with coercive control, with false imprisonment, with assault. And at the trial, the things that came out about the shed, about the bolts, about the years of silence, painted a picture of a cruelty so mundane, so domestic, so methodical, that it made people in the jury physically ill. They called it coercive control. They called it false imprisonment. They gave him 12 years. And Eleanor sat in the courtroom, and she listened to the verdict, and she felt nothing for him. Not anger, not hatred, not even relief. She felt nothing, because he had taken so much from her that there was nothing left of him in her to feel anything with. And that, she realized, was the freedom of being empty of him. Now she sits in her small flat with her plants on the windowsill and her knitting on the arm of the chair and her daughter's face on the screen. And the front door has a lock, a single small brass lock, and it is unlocked because she chooses to unlock it. And the window beside her is open because she chooses to open it. And the air that comes through is the air of a gray British morning. Air that smells of rain and car exhaust and something green growing somewhere. And she breathes it in. And she does not ask permission. The sentence did not matter to Eleanor. The justice was secondary. What mattered was this moment. The simple, impossible miracle of looking at her daughter's face without fear. Of having a window she can open whenever she wants. Of a door with a lock that she controls. Of a life that belongs to her and her alone. This is the story of Eleanor Roach. And it is not a story about a villain. It is a story about a woman who was disappeared. One tiny insignificant piece at a time, until there was almost nothing left. And it is a story about how she found those pieces again. Not all of them. Some are gone forever. Some are buried too deep to ever be recovered. But enough. Enough to hold in her hands. Enough to build a life on. Enough to open a window and breathe. If this story moved you, if you felt Eleanor's journey in your chest, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is remind each other that no one deserves to disappear. That every woman, every person, deserves to be seen and heard and believed. If you are new to Fireside Tales, consider subscribing, because there are more stories like this one, stories of survival, stories of hope, stories that stay with you long after the final word. And if you have a story of your own, a story of survival, a story of finding your way back to the light, consider sharing it in the comments. Because your story might be the one that gives someone else the strength to break their own window and breathe for the first time in years. Thank you for listening. And until next time, keep the fire burning, keep the stories alive, and never forget that you deserve to take up space in this world.